nobody had a word for what was happening to her. Not menopause, not a diagnosis, not even a polite way to bring it up at dinner. She's hot for no reason. She hasn't slept properly in weeks. She snaps at people she loves and doesn't fully know why. And there's no name for any of it. There's just whatever word a doctor happens to feel like reaching for that century. You, right now, watching this, you've got a name for it. You've got a doctor who's supposed to know what it is. You might even have a patch or a pill if you want one. She had none of that. She just had people around her deciding what to call what she was going through. And most of the time, they got it wrong on purpose. So let's actually go through the whole thing, start to finish, because it's a lot worse and honestly, a lot weirder than you'd think. Go back almost 2,500 years. A Greek philosopher named Aristotle is writing about animals. And he mentions, almost in passing, that a woman's ability to have children stops around age 40. That's it. That's basically the entire medical record on this for the next 2,000 years. Not a diagnosis, not a condition worth naming, just one guy noting it down, and then almost total silence for 2 millennia. Think about that. 2,000 years. Imagine every single symptom you might recognize today. The heat that comes out of nowhere, the nights you can't sleep, the moments you snap at someone you love and immediately regret it, and there's not one doctor, not one book, not one person with any real authority who can tell you what's happening or why. If she felt strange, hot, exhausted, furious, it just got folded into whatever catch-all explanation was fashionable that decade. And some of that catch-all explanation, if you've watched our other video on this, you'll recognize the same wandering womb nonsense doctors use to explain almost anything wrong with a woman's body. Menopause wasn't its own thing. It was just more proof to them that something was fundamentally wrong with women in general. She wasn't a person going through a phase. She was evidence for an argument she never agreed to be part of.
Then, in 1821, a French doctor named Charles Pierre Louis de Gardon finally sits down and gives it an actual name, menopause. It comes from Greek, men, meaning month, and pausis, meaning stop. The stopping of the months. Simple, almost boring, really. Except, here's the twist. Giving it a name didn't make anything better for her. It arguably made it worse. Because now, doctors had an official label to pin on you. And in the Victorian era, that label got dark fast. Physicians started using terms like climacteric insanity, involutional melancholia, and this one's almost hard to believe out loud, old maid's insanity. These weren't jokes. These weren't slang somebody's uncle made up. These were real, official, written down psychiatric diagnoses, the kind a doctor would say to your family with a straight face. And women given these labels weren't just brushed off. They were locked away. There are real asylum records, from London to New York, of women admitted at exactly this age, going through exactly this transition. Picture it for a second. You're hot, you're tired, you're irritable in a way you don't fully recognize in yourself. And instead of anyone asking what your body is going through, someone signs a paper. And now you live behind a locked door, not for weeks, sometimes for years. The official reason written on that paper wasn't hormones. It was insanity. There was one doctor who actually pushed back. His name was Edward Tilt, and he was working in the mid-1800s. He argued, pretty directly for the time, that the mental health symptoms women went through during this transition were usually temporary, not permanent madness, just a phase the body was moving through. And here's the frustrating part. He was right. Barely mattered. The negative attitudes stuck around for another 100 years anyway, because being right one time doesn't undo a century of habit. Doctors kept doing what they'd always done because that's what they'd always done. And this is the part where you'll probably recognize something you didn't expect to. Because here's the twist nobody really wants to say out loud. We didn't actually fix this. We just repainted it. A survey from 2025 found that nearly 40 out of every 100 women going through this exact transition were misdiagnosed the first time they went looking for help. Picture that appointment. She sits down, describes exactly what's happening to her body, and walks out with a prescription for something that has nothing to do with hormones. You know what doctors treated them for instead? Anxiety, depression.
Not hormones, mental health. The exact same substitution Victorian doctors were making 150 years earlier, just with cleaner paperwork and a nicer waiting room. And a doctor who genuinely believes he's helping.
And the cost of getting it wrong isn't small either. A poll published just this past January found that more than a quarter of women, 28 out of every 100, have seriously thought about quitting their job because of what their body was putting them through. 7 out of every 100 already have. Think about what that actually means. A career, sometimes decades of one, walked away from quietly, not because the work changed, but because nobody built a system that took what she was going through seriously enough to keep her in the room. Nobody's locking anyone in an asylum anymore, but the ending for a lot of women isn't so different. They just leave on their own instead of being escorted out. So here's the whole timeline, laid out plainly. Almost 2,500 years with no name for this at all. Then a name, followed by 100 years of calling it madness. And only very recently, real research starting to catch up. And even now, getting the actual diagnosis wrong nearly half the time. And honestly, what we're covering next might be even harder to sit with than this one. Don't miss it.
So here's what we actually want to know. Has anyone ever brushed off something real you were going through and called it just something smaller than it actually was? Because it took medicine over 2,000 years to even give this a name, and it's still getting the diagnosis wrong close to half the time. That's not a small thing to shrug off. That's just the same old dismissal wearing a slightly newer coat.